everybody. My name is Jeremy Solomon, and I will be a host for this evening. And what an evening we have planned! I am super excited for everything that is going to happen from this moment on. I want to thank every one of you all for taking your time to be a part of this discussion. And this is a very important discussion as well. So I understand that many of us have many different things that we had to do at this point in time, but I really want to thank all of the attendees in this meeting who have taken their time out of their busy schedules to be part of a discussion on mental health on World Mental Health Day. Now, there are a few things that I have to say before we proceed. And this is regard to a few technical things that we want to keep out of the way before we go any further. One is, as we all know, we are on Zoom. And as we are using technology to get things done these days, there may be some glitches here and there. There hasn't been any glitches in our webinars before this, but just in case there is, we have an excellent person behind the scene, Anjum, who will help us get through those glitches and make sure this is smooth flowing. If in case there are still glitches, like there are lags with the audio or video, a request would be for you all to leave the meeting and join the meeting again, and then perhaps things would work out just fine. For those who wanted to be a part of this webinar but did not get a chance to register for it, don't worry. If you know anyone like this, you can direct them to our Facebook page, that's Oasis International School on Facebook, and we are live right now on Facebook. In fact, all of our previous webinars have been live on Facebook as well. For instance, about a month ago, we did one webinar on the National Education Policy. A week after that, we did one on soft skill development in collaboration with Gleek. And after that, we did another one on professional development. And now we're doing one on mental health. If you missed any of our previous webinars, you will find it on our Facebook page, and it's also uploaded on our YouTube channel. So you can go check that out if you want to know some of the other things that we have been doing as well. Another thing I would like to say is we would love to know the different things that you are thinking in the course of this discussion. We cannot really interact with each other. I know that you do not have access to your video and your audio, but there is a way to do this. Our chat section is open. So during the course of the webinar, in case you'd like to say something or share a thought, you can do that on the chat section. We'd love to know what you're thinking. Also, in case you have a question for any one of our panelists, you can put that question in the Q&A section. And it would be nice if you would write down who you want that question directed to as well. The only request over here is to restrict questions to the Q&A section and conversation and thoughts to the chat section. So it's easy for us to choose questions and not search the chat section for questions. And this goes for Facebook as well. If you're watching this on Facebook, and in case you have anything you'd like to say or ask, you can put it down in the comment section. And now the most exciting part for this evening is the introduction of our moderator, Seema Siddiq. Seema, are you with us? Can you come on camera for a moment? So while Seema comes on camera, I just want to say that I've known Seema for about a year now, and she and I has worked together at Oasis International School. And having worked together, not only is she an amazing person, she is a very nice person to simply sit and talk with, to have a conversation with. Yeah, there is Seema, to have a conversation with. We have had many conversations, both about uh, professional things, and there are times when I was able to share many things about myself on how I work and different things with different students and well. And she's an amazing listener too, not only as a person, but she is also a counselor in the school, and she takes psychology classes for some of the senior grades as well, and also runs a practice outside of school as well. So I do not see a better qualified person to moderate this discussion. a reminder to everyone as Seema goes forward. Seema will be asking you different polls as well. There'll be different polls put up. So do participate in those polls as well, because I'm excited to hear what you have to say. I'm excited to hear what Seema is going to say to us, and also with everyone who is going to be a part of this panel discussion. So once again, this is Jeremy Solomon signing out as host and handing it over to Seema. Over to you, Seema.
Thank you, Jeremy, and a very good evening to everyone. On behalf of Oasis International School, a very, very warm welcome to all attendees for a session over tea. In this session today, we are talking about the most relevant concerns regarding mental health. It is the need of the hour, and considering the situation in the world today, no amount of awareness is enough. So here we are for you, breaking down the myths and understanding the very basics about mental health and counseling from the very best in this field. So today joining us are three very qualified and experienced practicing counselors. They each practice individually and volunteer at different mental health organizations. They are actively involved in bringing about awareness and are very happy to be here answering all the queries that have come in. So grab your tea and let's get started. Our first segment is about mental health and why you should try therapy. And our very first guest for this segment is Tejaswita. She is a certified counselor for adults, adolescents, and children. She has worked with children, and as a volunteer counselor at a school, she sees clients in her private practice. She also volunteers for the Parivartan Counseling Helpline. She's very passionate about learning more about healing and wellness. And the best part, she is also a certified yoga instructor, which makes her a perfect combination for holistic mental health.
Thank you, Seema.
Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes. So Teju, before we start our segment, we have a quick poll. All right. We have a poll that's going to just last for 20 seconds. So I would like the audience to be very quick in choosing the answer to the question that we're posting. The question is going to be, should more importance be given to mental health? So let the poll come up, please. Okay, I can see that. So the quick poll is, should more importance be given to mental health? Okay. All right. Oh, wow. Okay, so we've got the answers with us. Yes, and we've got 100%. So that means everyone here, all the attendees here agree that, mental health should be given a lot of importance. So Teju, let's dive right into, what we have here today. I'll start with some basic concerns that I often hear when, someone is struggling with a situation or a relationship or a change, basically finding it difficult to cope. For example, some of the common worries that are expressed, and one of the questions always come like, I've been crying a lot, why am I struggling? I have this sudden anger that I didn't have before. Or, do I need to talk to someone? Should I get some help? So a lot of questions that come commonly, and most people do not relate it to poor mental health. So Teju, starting with the very basics, can you tell us what mental health is?
Yeah, Seema, that's an excellent question. What is mental health? And I'd say a very good analogy, it's not a perfect one, is to just think of it just like physical health. Now, in physical health, when I'm talking someone, are you healthy? Someone might have an illness, let's say they have diabetes or they have cancer. That is an illness. And the equivalent there for mental health might be that, okay, maybe people have hallucinations, maybe they have, some certain conditions like autism, maybe they have severe insomnia. So there are very clear-cut symptoms and maybe a manifestation as a disease. So that we often think that this is mental ill health, and everything else is mental health. I'd say that's step one. There are two other parts to it. One would also be, I would look at physical health in terms of if there are any sudden changes in your body. So for example, you always weighed a certain amount, 65 kgs, and in a few weeks you've like shot up or lost weight. That's a sign. You know, you might be in the healthy range for your physical health, but that's a sign to look out for. Similarly, that's the kind of thing in mental health as well. We'd say, you know, someone who's normally been a calm person and is suddenly finding a lot of anger, you know, or they're blowing up at people, that would be a sign, you know, this is a change. So this is like, normally I would not say getting angry is a sign of ill mental health. We all do, and it's a normal emotion. But that kind of change, that I think is important to look out for in mental health. And the third one is something that's very dear to my heart, which is more in terms of, you know, you might be physically healthy, but there's nothing wrong with improving your diet a bit just to have more energy. Or you might be perfectly physically healthy and you might join the gym to, you know, run a marathon. So this is not physical ill health. You're not doing something to fix something. You're doing something to improve from where you are. And I think for me, that's a very crucial part, that, you know, do not look at mental health as just either it's extreme illness, you know, you're schizophrenic, or you need, you know, desperate changes. It might just be to maximize your potential. It might be to, you know, make better decisions, might be to cultivate more gratitude, acceptance. There's a whole field of like positive psychology that works on that. So I'd say that view mental health like physical health. There's no, you know, binary, it's a continuum. And yeah, don't wait till you're in the illness stage, just keep working on it.
Right, right. It's a good point there, Teju. We have to give mental health importance just how much we give our physical health importance. And, you know, not wait till the very end to approach these concerns that come up. So once we have decided to get mental health, the next question that most would ask is, who do I go to? There's often like this confusion between, should I go to a psychologist? Should I go to a psychiatrist? Should I go to a counselor? Should I go to a therapist? If you can just throw in some, you know, light on that.
Yeah, like a couple of years back, you know, even I didn't know the difference, like just like psi something. So the short answer is there are three main categories, I would say. There are a lot more, but mainly these three. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor. They've done their 5 years of MBBS and then they've specialized. Just like a cardiologist is specializing in your heart issues, and ortho is looking at bones. A psychiatrist is looking at your mental health in terms of the, you know, manifestation in terms of your feelings, behavior, and thoughts. So that's a psychiatrist. He is a doctor. He or she is the only one who's prescribed to give medication. The second one is a psychologist. There are different kinds, clinical, etc. And they are someone who have done a degree in psychology. They've studied psychology, you know, at their bachelor's or master's level. And they are trained to assess mental health issues and diagnose conditions. So, you know, they might be running a questionnaire to find out whether you have attention deficit disorder, ADD, or, you know, something like that. Right. The third category are people who are counselors or talk therapists. There are other kinds of therapies as well. Today we are focusing on talk therapy. So these are people who have specialized with certain skills to help people through listening and conversation. So that's talk therapy specifically. And the emphasis here is on the practical application of a lot of theories of psychology. And there are a number of approaches within counseling. You know, people could be doing this counseling, this process of listening, conversing, you know, unraveling in terms of cognitive behavior therapy, transaction analysis, which is another approach, integrative humanistic approach, which is something we follow. So there are a lot of kinds of, you know, counselors. And a good example of counseling would be, you know, you have a ball of yarn that's all tangled up. So when a person comes in and they're like, this is happening, that is happening, it's like, and a counselor could be listening and sort of trying to unravel, you know, and put it back like, you know, neat ball of wool. So I would say if you're confused about where to begin, do I go to a psychiatrist? Where I think a good idea is to start with a counselor or a psychologist. They are often overlapping. You might have done a degree in psychology and done a training in counseling. That's pretty much all of us here. So that is kind of a good place to start, and they will refer you to a psychiatrist if needed.
Yeah, there is a lot of anticipation to approach any mental health practitioner. And it's a good start, like you said, that's a good suggestion. Start with a counselor first, and then they will be able to direct you if you need to go to anybody else, okay? So that brings us to another question that has been asked by the audience. So is it better to go with medication, or should I just go for counseling? Like, what will help me more?
Yeah, that even I've got that question a lot. And honestly, there's no easy answer to that. There are people who strongly prefer medication, and there are others who are very against it. In some cases, medication might be the only thing that works. There are things that, nothing else will work. But then at the same time, there might be, it might take time sometimes to find the right dose and to find, the right drug for you. Also, I want to just add again what I said last time, that it's not necessarily a choice between I can either take drugs or go to a counselor. You can go to a counselor, and sometimes the counselor and the psychiatrist will work in hand, that you might be on, maybe anti-anxiety medication and be seeing a therapist every week. So it's not necessarily a choice, and I think it's best to keep an open mind to both.
Yeah, it's good to be aware and keep the options open. And it is also about knowing there is nothing wrong in approaching a psychiatrist also, or taking medication. So so one of the questions that come along with this is, okay, I've decided to go to a counselor or a psychiatrist. Where do I find this good counselor? Like, who should I ask? What should I do?
Yeah. So I think finding a counselor is probably easier these days. You can just go online, and there are a lot of forums and apps which can help you. If you just Google, counselor near me, I think you'll get a long list of them. The important thing I want to emphasize here is that good, so good is subjective. I think an example that we discussed was that, look at this as a cup of tea. So I like my tea with sugar, and there are people who like their tea without sugar. Does that mean this tea is bad, the one with sugar? Not really. So that same thing applies to counselors, because it's a relationship, and it's very important that you try a counselor and see whether you feel understood, you feel heard and listened to. And if you feel this is not working, don't give up on counseling and therapy altogether, because it is about, finding the right fit for you. Try a few more. I'm sure there'll be the tea that suits you.
Yeah, that's a really good example. It really helps everyone understand that it's okay to have one bad experience and then move to another. It's all right to try someone else over here. So a very interesting question I want to put forward is, often I find clients coming to me and referring their loved ones or friends, and they tell me that they request me to counsel them without the person knowing that I'm counseling them.
Yeah, I've got that too. I met someone in the park, and they were like, my husband, can you just not like tell him that you're a counselor? And just, so I was like, I wish it was just a magic wand. It's not. So, it's just like in physical health. You can't just wish someone to have, a better stamina and just buy them a gym subscription and say that they don't even really need to go there. You need, the person who's in counseling needs to want to change, needs to be aware of what it is that they're working on and what it is that they want to reach. So unfortunately, no, this magic wand thing of just counseling someone without their knowing is kind of not happening.
Yes.
It would be very important for the person to want to desire change and work towards it.
Yeah. So rightly said, Teju, therapy is much more than sitting on a couch. We understand there's so many misconceptions about what it means to talk to a mental health professional. And I hope what you have told us today will give better clarity to everyone here and bring about that awareness. The need to talk about your emotions is seen as something to poke fun at, weak, shameful, stigmatized. And because of that stigma, we never find people coming and seeking help in the first place. And they don't want to talk about it as well.
Yeah, Seema, I mean, I personally have experienced a lot of help. I think it has helped me with a range of issues, and it is like an incredible tool if you use it, And I think it depends. Like sometimes you might come there with a very specific problem, saying that I need this help with decision making. At other times, you might come there saying that, okay, I'm not sleeping well, I'm struggling with sad feelings, stuff like that. So it depends on what is the context at that time. And I would say that mental health is something that you should look at on an ongoing basis, reiterating the same thing. So don't wait for things to get really bad. Seek help early. It doesn't mean you're mentally ill. It just means that you can do with a little help and probably do better.
Yeah. So yes, would encourage
a physical trainer in a gym is not a sign that you're terrible without him.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So yes, looking at what you have told us, it is a good idea to try therapy if you feel that you are going through any of these changes and all the things that you told us about. Okay. So thank you, Teju. It was very informative, and I hope our audience found it helpful. You can ask Tejas with questions in the chat box, and she will be very happy to reply to you if you have anything addressed to her. So while we move on to our next segment, that is therapy for adults, we will run another poll. So be ready. So our next guest, okay, we will start with the poll. Do you worry talking about intimate details to a counselor? Yes or no? We have only 20 seconds. Okay, so we have the poll has come in, and we have the question was, do you worry about intimate details to a counselor? And 49% have said yes, and 51% has said no. Okay, so that's a very small difference on how people agree to this. And we'll have a next guest who's going to answer this question, who's going to throw more light on this. Our next guest is Rakesh Meher. He is a counselor trained in counseling adults, children, and adolescents from Parivartan. He is also trained in pure affirmative counseling. In his practice, Rakesh works with adults and adolescents on sexuality, body image, relationship, career, health work life, and family concerns. And when he's not practicing, he is passionate about writing and philosophy. So welcome, Rakesh. We're very
Hi,
happy to have you here.
Hi, Seema. Happy
Hi.
to be.
Yes. So you saw what the poll asked our audience, and the answers we got: 49% saying no, and 51% saying yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'll definitely get to that.
Yes.
Um,
So we'll start with you heard Teju break down mind blocks about mental health, and it will be great to hear you help us further understand what comes with counseling and therapy. And
sure.
to start with, so we see that on one hand, there is a need for counseling. We all are aware of that. We think it's important. And on the other hand, there is a reluctance to go for counseling. What would you say about that? Like, people do, how people shy away from admitting that they need it,
Yeah, I think it has to do with how we view adulthood versus childhood, since we're specifically talking about counseling for adults here.
right?
We tend to think of childhood as a time to learn and grow, and therefore, it's also a time when you're allowed to be dependent on parents, on teachers, and other people, other adults in your life. On the other hand, when we think about adulthood, we think about adulthood in terms of self-sufficiency. So there is this idea that now we are all grown up, so we can't go running to somebody else for help. Uh, in many circumstances, this translates into a belief that an adult shouldn't ask for help or depend on others too much. Um, this is also reinforced by the kind of messaging that we give each other. Um, like when we see people facing emotional difficulties, our most usual messages are stay strong, be positive, that kind of thing. And the difficulty with that kind of messaging is that it seems to it seems to say that mental health is a question of disciplining your thoughts and feelings, and it unfairly characterizes those who are unable to do that as inadequate in some ways. In reality, we know that mental health difficulties are a combination of a lot of different things. Genetics and biology, childhood experiences, the learning we've had throughout our lives. So it's not as simple as saying we just have to train how we think.
Yeah, yeah. So rightly said, Rakesh. We think as an adult, it's a passing phase, and we all need to be positive, and we kind of dismiss our past experiences or feelings that affect us today as an adult. So one of the concerns we receive from the audience that it might be more difficult for men to approach therapy than women. What has been your experience of this?
So you can see why this might be the case, because if you look in most societies, but particularly the society we live in India, uh, the gender roles or the codes of how different genders should behave places a very high emphasis on men to be capable, confident, and strong. So from an early, from a very young age, we tell men that they shouldn't cry, that they shouldn't show their feelings, that they shouldn't show themselves being vulnerable. This makes it very difficult for men to reach out for therapy, because it's one of the first steps is admitting that there's a certain vulnerability that you want help with. And even when men do take that step, what I've seen is that very often there's a certain difference in the kind of emotions that they're willing to engage with, and those that have difficulty with, even in the therapy room. Particularly feelings of sadness or hurt, which are feelings of vulnerability, they find much more difficult to engage with, even in the therapy space.
Yeah. I often do find it challenging, even counseling boys and teenage boys, at school, because somewhere, like you said, culturally, they don't have the permission to express, so it is difficult to, help them explore certain emotions that, culturally they've not been allowed to express. So coming down to another question that's very basic is that, can you tell us how therapy works? What does the counselor do in a session? People have this anticipation, like what's going to happen. If you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so primarily the therapy is the creation of a safe and non-judgmental space, which means that this is a space where the client can come in and talk about anything that is on their mind, and the uh, the counselor is trained in what is called unconditional positive regard. Sorry, my battery was just giving me some trouble there. Yeah, so counselors are trained in what is called unconditional positive regard, which is a way of being consistently supportive, affirmative, and respectful towards the client, irrespective of what they choose to share. So this is one of the crucial ways in which therapy differs from talking to friends and family. When we talk to these other people in our lives, there's always a lingering doubt in our minds about what is this person going to think about me when I say this to them, which then automatically filters so much of what we feel we are allowed to say to them or not. A therapist is the one person with whom you can make yourself fully heard, and you don't have to curate yourself and worry about what parts of yourself you're letting them see. This kind of open sharing in itself has a very deep therapeutic value, because these are concerns that weigh on us for a long period of time and that we hold closely, but we find very difficult to express. So opening up about it itself makes a big difference. But beyond that, the counselor also plays a facilitative role with regard to our patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. Now, what this means is that when we talk to friends or family again, uh, the typical response we get is, here's what you should do to get over this situation or to work out this problem. But the point is that what you should do always comes from the life location and experiences and what works for the other person, and not necessarily what works specifically for you.
Yeah.
Uh, One of the things about therapists is particularly those who are trained in humanistic methods, is that they understand that each person's life is different, and therefore their responses to different situations are also unique. So what counseling does is to focus on the process, which is what are the thoughts and feelings we're experiencing, what are the assumptions and beliefs and values that are coming behind these thoughts and feelings, and how are they affecting how we react and behave in different situations. But the client is the one who retains the choice about having discovered all this through the help of the counselor. What do I want to do with this?
Yeah.
The counselor is not someone who trusts advice
Yeah.
on the
So to reiterate that, it's not about the advice giving, but more about the journey you take in processing your feelings and thoughts. Yeah. So we saw from the poll, the percentage that for a lot of people, sharing intimate details of their life to a stranger can be scary. Although 58% say it's all right for me to share. In particular, there's a concern about what a therapist will do with all that information they're giving. So could you tell us a little bit about the ethical rules that a counselor works
Yeah, okay. So one of the foundational rules of the counseling profession is confidentiality. This means that when a client enters the session room, everything they say in there is restricted to that session space, and nothing that they say will be repeated to anyone outside the counseling room. There are very few exceptions to this rule. The main one is that in case there is the possibility of imminent harm to the client or to somebody else, that is, the client seems very likely to commit to attempt suicide, or or may injure themselves or hurt someone else, then the counselor may break confidentiality, bring in more people and resources to better support the client. But counselors are equipped with rigorous processes for when to take such a decision, and they are also ethically required to always discuss it with the client before doing so. So in that sense, even in that rare circumstance, there are ethical safeguards for how and when the confidentiality can be broken. Now, also procedurally, counselors work under a system of supervision, where they work with a more experienced counselor on improving their skills in general and their approaches to particular clients. Now, the point is, even with this structure of supervision, the focus is on the counselor's skills and actions and not the content of the client, and the entire process is further bound by strict rules of confidentiality. So supervisors are again required to be completely confidential about whatever those they are supervising come and discuss in those supervisory sessions. So there's an entire ethical structure that is built around ensuring the privacy and confidentiality of the client's information. So you can be very sure that what you share with your therapist is always kept safe and confidential.
Yeah. So that's quite a relief for all those who doubt that, anything that they say is going to go out. So people also have concerns about, how much therapy costs, because, it seems like it's really expensive. How long am I going to pay for this? So can you tell us, a little bit how it works with that?
So as I said, each person's emotional life and circumstances are unique. So there are no easy and formulaic answers for how to work through your emotional difficulties. Our emotional lives are deeply layered, and therefore it does take time and effort to discover the patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving, and work out ways to, restructure them and change how we live our lives. So it is important not to be hasty in our expectations of results. But having said that, many therapists do understand that staying in therapy for a long period of time can be financially difficult for many people. So a lot of people do offer, lower fees or sliding scales, or even some amount of free sessions in order to make their services accessible to more people. So there is a wide range when it comes to the cost of therapy, and that's something you need to do a bit of research on when you're looking for your therapist.
Right. So there are many counselors, therapists available, and everyone is priced differently. So you can see what suits you, whether it's an area or the fee that they're charging. Rakesh, moving on to what markers do you suggest for seeing the effectiveness of therapy? Like how long do you do it, and what would you briefly tell us about it?
Yeah. So it varies from, again, since we've said so many times that each person's life is unique, it also varies for different people. But overall, I would say there are three primary goals or milestones. Okay. The first is becoming more aware of the thoughts and feelings we experience in different situations. Because actually, generally, when we go through life, we tend to identify one major emotion, one dominant thought, and not pay attention to everything else that goes on below the surface. So even being able to see that entire spectrum of our emotional lives is a huge sign of progress. The second is recognizing the links between those thoughts and feelings and the behaviors they influence in particular situations and the outcomes that result from them. Because again, it's not an automatic process from some event or action happening to how we feel and how we behave. There are lots of choices we make along the way. So becoming aware of those choices is again a huge sign of progress. And finally, having learned to be aware of our emotions, having learned how to track the influence they have on our lives, the third step is finding ways to change these patterns. So this would be my threefold structure for how to know whether therapy is working and how we're making progress.
All right, that's a great way to kind of assess how you're doing. Yeah. So lastly, Rakesh, if you can just point out a couple of challenges that mental health that among young adults today, or just adults, that they are facing.
Okay, so actually the thing is, India is actually facing a serious mental health crisis that we are still lacking the resources to deal with. Recent studies say that 15% of the population requires intervention for one or more mental health issues, and 1 in 20 Indians suffers from depression. So that makes depression a far more common mental health condition than we really expect or even think is the case. Similarly, the rate of anxiety is also much higher than you would expect. But the final point that I want to make, sort of again adding on to some of the things that Tejaswita was saying, is that we shouldn't be only be thinking about therapy and mental health in terms of diagnosable conditions of mental illness. That diagnosis shouldn't be the threshold. I would rather think about therapy as useful for a variety of conditions relating to difficulties in relationships, work, home, parenting, all of these. And so I would say paying attention to all of these things is also just as important as thinking about what are the parameters of mental health conditions that we see today.
Yeah. So these are some of the challenges that we are facing, and I hope the awareness of knowing what this process is about and understanding that everyone is and encourage getting help, because that will help our younger generation also take care of themselves. So thank you, Rakesh, for being here and giving us all that information and awareness. Rakesh will be present on chat if anyone would like to address a question to him. And we will be talking about the younger generation in the next segment. So let's move on to mental health with children. Before we go to the poll, I would like to introduce our guest speaker for the next segment. It's Masira Saeed. Masira Saeed is a counseling psychologist and a certified counselor from Parivartan. She works passionately with children in this field. She has worked for mental health programs in the last 10 years. She likes to travel, read, curate, and experience places off the off-beaten track, and she can't drink her tea without ginger. So welcome, Masira.
Thank you for that introduction, Seema. I have my tea here, my ginger tea ready for the session.
Great. So before we start, I'm going to put out the poll again. Can we have the poll, please? Yes. So the poll says, do you think it's a good idea to have a counselor present in schools or educational institutions? So let's see what our audience thinks. Reminder, 20 seconds is all you get to answer. Wow, okay. So do you think it's a good idea to have a counselor present in schools, educational institutions? And 98% say yes. We have a 2% audience that does not agree with it. So, all right. So as you know, we have had 2 interesting segments talking about mental health in adults. What I would love for you to tell us, Masira, what is mental health in a child and how does it look like? How do we know?
So let me begin with, what does good mental health in children look like? So when they are reaching and they're attaining their developmental and emotional milestones, when they are, when they have learned to demonstrate healthy social skills, and they have the ability to cope with problems on an everyday basis. In short, what I mean to say is, if they are functioning, efficiently in their environment, in their immediate environment, which is their home, their school, their playground, that's when we know that their mental health is in the right place. But sadly, good mental health is not so prevalent, especially in the world that we are living in today. Mental health problems affect about 1 in 10 children, and that's alarming. So, here, just to, say that, if, the question on how does it, if children are suffering from from mental health disorders or problems, How does that look like? Is fortunately or unfortunately, it is very explicit in children when they are suffering from any mental disorder, because they tend to show very clear signs in the way they learn, the way they behave or they react. So in the sense, they'll show signs of distress, they'll show fear, they'll be worrisome, and it will be different from how they usually behave around in their environment. So that becomes a sign that we adults need to watch out for.
Okay, so it's very important. What you're saying is very important to be aware and observant, and not let it pass. So one of the questions that is asked from the audience is, when should I worry about my child's mental health? Like, what are the things I would see or
Yes.
do?
So, looking at how often a behavior occurs or how long it lasts, the intensity of the mood of behavior can also help you decide if it's a problem or not. Now, saying that, you have to understand that children have and they go through different phases. So that's why if one off incident when the child is throwing a tantrum or is behaving differently than they usually do, you shouldn't be on your guard. It's basically the time, duration, and intensity. These three you have to keep in mind. And also be watchful when it starts interfering with your child's ability to function efficiently, when they are not able, when they're struggling at home or at school. That's when you should be concerned about your child's mental health.
Okay, so that you're saying that you have to watch the child for a couple of weeks or months, only then come to a conclusion that there could be a problem there, but not like one-off tantrums or like 2-3 days of there's a change in them, not that much. So okay, yes, that's a good point to make, because parents will worry less then. Can you tell us some signs that educators and parents or caretakers can watch out for when their child is under their care? What are the things
That
to rely on?
that's something very relevant that you're asking, Seema, because mostly people who care for the well-being of the children, but they don't know the right signs to watch out for.
Right.
So sometimes if again when I'm mentioning about these signs, we have to keep in mind that they happen very frequently for a longer duration, that the child has been experiencing these signs. So on something like unprovoked anger, or any behavior that is inappropriate for their age, like suddenly a 10-year-old starts bedwetting, or when they have difficulty to adjust to new social situations, or they become suddenly withdrawn. They have a lot of nightmares, they are constantly worrying, or their grades drop in school. So these are some of the signs to watch out for. Also, some of the serious signs that might be indicative of a more serious mental health disorder could be when the child is involving in some form of self harm. When I say self harm, it's also depriving themselves of food for a longer period of time, scratching, hair pulling, cutting themselves. So these are signs, more serious signs. Also, when they talk about if they are hearing voices or if they are seeing something. So I know all children go through this phase of an imaginary friend, but if you have to be watchful about how often they have been talking about this imagination, that can be a sign of a serious problem as well. Repetitive behavior again can be a sign of some form of early development of obsessive compulsive disorders. So these are signs that if parents and educators can watch out for.
Okay. So yes, so the main keyword would be changes, and good points to look out for if you see a change for a period of time. Another question that has been asked, Masira, is how will counseling help my child? Of course, we know how it works for adults. We had Teju and Rakesh tell us, but can you tell us how does it work with children? Because they're not going to go there and start talking about what's going
Correct. So yes, children, counseling works differently for children, but there is some commonality when it comes to how we work with adults. So in terms of, how Rakesh spoke about the space that we give them, which is a safe space, it is a confidential space, a trust is formed. They also are encouraged to, build a relationship where they feel comfortable to talk about their problems or express their problems and issues. But at the same time, as it's rightly said, that children don't express themselves through words as much as they express themselves through play. So child psychologists and child counselors use different mediums to work with children, like clay therapy, there is play therapy, there is sand work, art therapy. So these become medium through which the child gets to express themselves, and they don't have to sit, they don't feel intimidated and being cornered and they're being asked questions. That's not the way the child opens up. If you sit down with them and read a book or story relevant to the problem they are going through, they are more likely to open up and talk to you about it. So in general, the goal of child counseling is to break their problem into smaller components so that, it can be more manageable. Children are young, it's very overwhelming for them to deal with problems. So, that is how. And also, child counselors work very closely with parents, because children don't have the autonomy to bring about that change in their life. So they have to work with parents to facilitate that change for them.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it's very important for parents to know that the child is not going to improve with counseling in isolation. It has to come in support with the parents, and if there is a teacher involved, then teachers. So Masiya, thank you for that. Another question from the audience I would like to ask you is: I want to take care or nurture my child's mental health, before it's too late. So how do I do it?
Yes. So I think it's never too late to start caring and nurturing for your child's mental health. My simple, suggestion would be to be aware, to be observant. Don't try to sneak around too much, but, nevertheless, always pay attention. Being, build strong relationships, communication. There shouldn't be any gap there. They should feel free to come up and talk to you. The way you discipline should also come with a lot of respect. I know people mostly think that respect is something for only elders and not for children. They're small, they don't understand the concept of respect, but children do need to be treated with respect.
Yeah.
Also, what happens most commonly in our homes is that, people often don't differentiate the child from the problem. So if there's a child who expresses anger, is labeled as an angry child. Now the child has an issue displaying or expressing anger, but when you label the child as an angry child, the whole child becomes about his anger. So we need to differentiate when we are talking about the issues we are struggling with children. It shouldn't be all about them. Again, labeling and comparing is something I totally discourage parents to do, because it impacts the self-esteem, which is the root cause of many mental disorders, not just in childhood, but as they grow up as well.
Yeah, that's a good point to make, that labeling and not differentiating the problem from the child. So yes, thank you for that. Some good tools to use. Can you tell me one important advice if you would like to give adults or encourage adults when they're dealing with children?
I think the important advice would be to practice what they preach. So if they want to promote good mental health in children, they should look after their mental health as well. To create a house and environment where problems are not brushed under the carpet. It's addressed, it's looked into. They feel free to talk about emotions. There's no bad or good emotion. So I think if we are able to provide that environment for them where they know mental well-being is as important as physical well-being, I think that's our biggest tool.
Yeah, positive self-care it's so important. Lastly, Masiya, coming to our poll question, counselors are available on most school campuses today. So when a child is recommended to a school counselor, most parents show a lot of anxiety and worry, so what would you say to that?
I think as parents, you should be really, you should feel happy and relieved that you're sending your child to an institute or a school where there is a counselor, because that goes to show that the institute is taking an extra step to ensure your child's well-being. As you would feel relieved that there's a nurse on campus, so if your child gets hurt in the playground, there'll be somebody to put that Dettol and address and so counselors in school are like, they provide the emotional first aid for the child, I would say. They assess if there is a problem, how to work about it. They discuss it with you. They also can refer you to the right person. So it is a team that's working towards the betterment of your child and make them emotionally strong and independent adults.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Masira. There's so much to take back from what you have told us. And yes, children and counseling, it might seem very bleak and worrisome for most parents, teachers, and caretakers. But from what we have heard from you, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And getting help is an option. And we encourage and invite you all to take care of your mental health first as parents and caretakers, and then, show that to your children, model that to your children. So thank you, Masira, for being here. Thank you all for listening. We now have the Q&A session, question and answer session, for about 8 to 10 minutes. For those who would like to get in touch with any of us, please find our emails at the end of the webinar and in the chat box. If we can look at the questions now. Okay, so I'll start with Teju. Teju, are you here? Yeah, hi Teju. Teju, one of the questions the audience has asked is, how drastically has the pandemic affected mental health?
So in my personal experience, I would say quite a bit, almost like friends and family that I've spoken to in one way or the other, almost everyone has, mentioned the impact it's having. Sometimes ostensibly, sometimes not that visibly, but I'd say it's a huge impact. I think being able to interact with people is a very key part of who we are as social beings, and I think it's a big impact.
Okay. Thank you, Teju. Rakesh, this question is for you. Why so many young adults are struggling today with mental health compared to, a couple of years ago, or compared to our parents and grandparents?
So I would actually say that this is a slightly more complex question in the sense that there are two parts to this. One is that we must remember that the space for talking about difficulties of mental health is something that only in recent years we're seeing that space opening up, and even now it's still a very small space, but it's better than it used to be before. So it's also that in our parents' generation or earlier generations, it is very likely that a lot of people were even then struggling with mental health concerns, but we just didn't know about it because there was no space to talk about it. So that is one part of the answer. The other part of the answer is that our life, the way we live our lives, is changing drastically. So if you think about how our parents or if you think even about our parents' generation, they basically tended to stay in the same city that they were born in. They tended to, after their education, when they found a job, they tended to stay in one job for very long periods of time. Maybe making 2 or 3 shifts at the most in their throughout their career. Divorce rates were much lower. So there are a lot of different ways in which their lives were, their lives had fewer changes and disruptions in them. Now, I'm not saying that this doesn't mean that being like having more job changes or increasing divorce rates or shifting cities. None of those are bad things in themselves, because they are also a sign of us being able to choose and find the way that we would most like to live our lives happily. We have more opportunities to find how we want to live a happy life. But the corresponding the flip side of that is that our lives are not as our lives have the possibility of more instability and change in them, and change and instability comes with uncertainty, which can then create feelings that we find difficult to cope with.
Right.
So it goes both ways. It could be that there were a lot more people that had mental health issues before that they weren't able to talk about, and it's also that our lives have changed in certain ways, which gives us more freedom, but also creates a space for more emotions that we find difficult to cope with.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that, Rakesh. I would like to ask Masira a question. It's different from the one that I was going to ask you. So what are the verbal clues we should look at to understand if my child needs help? I know you've addressed it. If you can just reiterate that. If a child needs help, what are the verbal clues to take?
So verbal clues could be, sometimes even if you're trying to look for verbal clues, they might not be there. Sometimes when they just become too quiet and withdrawn and silent is, are also very important messages. Sometimes, depending on the issue that they are dealing with, so they will talk about, leave me alone, or it's unfair. They talk in a very angry tone. So depending on the issue that they are feeling, that they are going through, their verbal cues would be accordingly. So there is no set verbal statements that I could give out here that would be, something to catch on to, but rather about anything that they seem to be saying too often, or that that's a pattern that's there in their head, or they're experiencing some kind of difficulty, they are verbalizing it in some way. So catch on to that. And also silence, I would say that most often, when they become quiet, when they become withdrawn, that's not understood, rather labeled as becoming dull or acting strange, but they give us the most, important cues. And, my another thing that I would like to say to all the parents out there is that children ask for love in the most unloving ways. So when they're throwing a tantrum or when they are being difficult, there is something that they're asking of you. So watch out for that.
Yes, thank you for that, Masira. One of the questions addressed to me is teenagers are very private nowadays. They don't like parents intruding how to go about the situation. I would say that teenagers are private people and we should just let them be. It's okay because we need to understand how development works. And it is part of their development to behave a certain way during that phase of their life. At the most, what as a parent, what you can do is keep communication open. Give them that space that they can walk in at any time they want, when they are comfortable and when they are not comfortable. So keeping that communication open with them and letting them know. So often we do not express how we, as a parent, we do not express to our teenagers. We feel they're not listening, but they're actually listening to every word you're saying. So it's okay to tell them, express love or express something that you're not okay with, you're okay with, and keeping that communication open and give them that space to be able to come in to talk to you, or give them a space like therapy where you feel that if there have been too many changes for a long period of time, then give them the option to seek therapy or help from a professional. Okay, so I think we are done for today. Thank you very, very much, Teju, Masira, and Rakesh for being here. Everything that you have told us today has been very, very informative, and I hope this awareness helps everyone here. So thank you for being here. Thank you, audience. I would like to hand over to Jeremy from here.
Thank you, Seema, and thank you everybody who came in to listen, and thank you to our very lovely panel as well. This is a conversation that has been very close to me. a topic rather that has been very close to me. A lot of conversations like this I've had with different other people, and I'm happy to be part of a discussion, even if not directly, on a more public platform as well. Because if at all anything is needed with regard to this, it is awareness. So I'm really glad to be a part of something like this as well. Also, a lot has been going on in the chat section. A lot of love coming in from our attendees, and a lot of questions, a lot of queries. Just thank you so much for everything that you've been giving us in the chat section and the questions that you were asked. I know that some of you asked questions. The panelists didn't answer them verbally, but they went on the Q&A section and answered it via text. So I hope all the questions have been answered. If in case you do want to get in touch with somebody and from the panel, and you'd like to know more about what they do, or even talk to them a little more about different issues, I'm just going to share a way to do that. This is a way to get in touch with Masira with her email address over here. I'm going to leave it for a few seconds. Rakesh and his email address here, another few seconds. Seema and her email address here. And Tejaswita and her email address. Um, I may have moved a little too fast. We've already overshot our time, and I wouldn't want to keep you all any longer than you have already committed to us. So, in case you want to go back and see what we have done, or go back to uh, find out what the email address is, like I said, we will be posting this on our social media platforms. And with that, I want to thank all of you all for being a part of our webinar on World Mental Health Day. We are present on all social media platforms, which is Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We will re-upload this entire webinar on YouTube as well. And for those who are watching us on YouTube, like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment in the comment section as well. Once again, I hope you have a lovely evening and a lovely week ahead as well, after an even lovelier weekend. This is Jeremy Solomon as host, signing out. Thank you, everybody.